Hi everyone, this is Eileen Valoria, Youth Programs Coordinator at the Andy Warhol Museum. Today I'm going to show you how to do Andy Warhol's blotted line process at home. There are several materials that you're going to need to prepare. One of those is a coffee ink. This I created a few weeks ago in a jar. Basically it is 1.5 tablespoons of instant coffee, 1.5 tablespoons of hot water, 1/4 teaspoon of vinegar, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And like I said, I've kept this in a jar for the last couple of weeks, and every now and then I just add a little bit of water to it to get it to the right consistency. As for a pen, Andy Warhol would have used a calligraphy ink pen. If you don't have one of those at home, you can make a really great adaptation using any wooden stick you might have, whether it's a popsicle stick, chopsticks, a skewer, and you're going to use sandpaper. Or if you don't have sandpaper, I also have a coarse nail file. And you're just going to create a soft angle on there. So I'll do that. You want to make sure that it's not too sharp, that it's going to puncture or tear the paper that you're going to be doing this on. Other than those two materials that you have to prepare in advance, you'll also need paper. You'll want to use something that's more of a heavier weight paper, something like a cardstock or even a light colored construction paper. You're going to need a source image to trace from. Today I'll be using this flower image, but you can also use simple line drawings that you've created yourself. And then you'll also need a pencil, some tape. You can use some parchment paper as your tracing paper that you will cut to the same size as your image and your drawing. You'll also need paper towels, paintbrushes, food coloring, and water to be used as your watercolor after your drawing is done. So Andy Warhol developed this technique when he was in college, and he used it in his commercial work in New York in the 1950s. It enabled Warhol to present multiple illustrations to his clients in different variations. So the first thing you're going to do is trace. I've cut my parchment paper the same size as my image. I'm actually going to be using some painter's tape so it's easier to see. But you can use any regular invisible matte tape. And you're going to create a hinge on your paper so that you're able to flip back and forth to see your image. Now you're only going to be tracing the outlines of your image. You don't necessarily need the fine details like there are in the leaves. And if you have trouble seeing your image through your parchment paper, you can always tape it to a window and use the sunlight as a modified light table. Once your tracing is complete, carefully remove it from your source image. And then create another hinge with the paper that you're going to transfer your ink drawing to. just going to mix up my coffee ink a little bit before using it. And holding your chopstick or popsicle stick like a pencil, you're going to dip it into your ink and then begin tracing and transferring. Sometimes it's nice to also practice on a piece of paper to see what kind of lines you can create, how much ink the stick is going to hold. And so you want to move from one side of the image to the other. You don't want to jump back and forth just in case you might smear it as you're drawing. And so you're going to trace. Small sections at a time. Flip it over. And lightly blot it over onto the other paper. And you will continue doing this until the entire image has been transferred. When you finish transferring your image completely, just carefully untape it all. And set it aside to dry before you begin to add color. I have one already dried here, and so I'm going to make sure that it's completely dry. If you want your image to dry a little bit faster, you can use a hair dryer to speed up the process. And so to add color to this lovely little ink drawing that we've created, we're going to use some food coloring and water. So you're going to add a few drops of whatever colors you would like to some water. And of course, once you're done painting, allow it to dry completely. You can repeat this process. You can try it out with different colored paper, different weights of paper, different colors of food coloring, and then you can have a collection of the same image, similar to how Warhol would do in his portfolios. You can send these as greeting cards. You can frame them up real nice. Thank you for watching.